the restoration of order. Introduction. How many apples are in a seed? Let me begin with a simple question. If I place an apple in front of you and ask, how many seeds are in this apple? You can answer me. Cut it open. Look inside. Count them. 5, 7, 9. Whatever happens to be inside that particular apple, that is a measurable question. The seeds are already there. You can see them, you can touch them, you can count them. But now let me reverse the question. How many apples are in one seed? Think about that for a moment. How many apples are inside this one tiny seed? Now the answer is not so simple. Because I am no longer asking you to count what you can presently see. I'm asking you to consider what the Father placed inside the seed as potential. If I take that seed and plant it in suitable soil, if it receives water, if it receives light, if it survives, if it grows, if it reaches maturity, that one seed can become a tree, and that tree can produce apples. Those apples contain more seed. Those seeds can be planted. Those seeds can become more trees. Those trees can produce more apples. And those apples contain still more seed. Now imagine the process continuing. One generation, then another, then another. A seed becomes a tree. The tree produces fruit. The fruit contains seed. The seed becomes another tree. And the cycle continues. Seed, tree, fruit, seed, tree, fruit. Generation after generation. Harvest after harvest. So when you hold one seed in your hand, you are holding something very small, but you are not merely holding what exists right now. You are holding productive possibility. You are looking at what the Father made possible through something that, at first glance, appears insignificant. One seed contains the potential for a tree. One tree contains the potential for many apples. Those apples contain the potential for many more trees. And the process can continue far beyond the lifetime of the person who planted the first seed. That means the Most High did not merely create provision for one moment. He created provision capable of continuing. He created provision capable of multiplying. He created provision capable of reproducing after its kind. And Scripture shows us that this was not accidental. This was part of the architecture from the beginning. Genesis 1:11-12 says,
And the Most High said, Let the earth bring forth grass, the herb yielding seed, and the fruit tree yielding fruit after his kind, whose seed is in itself upon the earth. And it was so. And the earth brought forth grass, and herb yielding seed after his kind, and the tree yielding fruit, whose seed was in itself after his kind. And the Most High saw that it was good.
Notice the language. Whose seed is in itself. The fruit carries within itself the means of continuation. The provision contains the possibility of future provision. The harvest contains the beginning of another harvest. The Father did not merely make an apple. He established a system through which apples could continue. He did not merely make one tree. He created trees capable of producing fruit containing the means through which more trees could come. And then only a few verses later, the Most High says to humanity in Genesis 1:29,
Behold, I have given you every herb bearing seed, which is upon the face of all the earth, and every tree, in the which is the fruit of a tree yielding seed. To you it shall be for meat.
Listen carefully to what is being given. Food. Yes, provision. Yes, but the food itself contains seed. The thing given for consumption also contains the mechanism for continuation. So the gift is greater than the immediate meal. Inside what satisfies today's hunger is something that can participate in feeding tomorrow. That is an extraordinary design. The Father did not merely put food into creation. He put multiplication inside the food. And once we understand that, we begin to see that seed is not merely an agricultural object. Seed reveals something about the way the Most High establishes order. There is a beginning. There is potential. There is cultivation. There is time. There is development. There is maturity. There is fruit. And inside the fruit is the possibility of beginning again. Later, after the flood, the Most High speaks this pattern directly. Genesis 8:22 says,
While the earth remaineth, seedtime and harvest, and cold and heat, and summer and winter, and day and night shall not cease.
Seed time and harvest. The Father joins those two realities together. There will be seed time and there will be harvest. But said time is not harvest. There is something between them. There is process. There is time. There is stewardship. There is patience. There is work. There is trust. So perhaps our first question was too small. Maybe the question is not simply how many apples are in one seed. Maybe the deeper question is, what did the Most High place inside the seed? You place continuation. You place multiplication. You place the possibility of future harvest. You place provision beyond the immediate moment. And He placed responsibility into the hands of the one who receives it. Because if I eat the apple, I have received provision. But if I understand the seed, I have begun to understand something about stewardship. I can consume what has been given, or I can recognize that what has been given may contain something intended to continue beyond me. That distinction will become very important. Because the restoration of order is not simply about having more. It is about learning again how the Father intended what He gave to function. Before Babylon, before currency, before banks, before stock exchanges, before corporations, before modern markets, before governments began determining who possessed what, before men built systems for measuring and assigning value, there was seed. Before mankind created an economic system, the Most High had already established a productive system. Before man assigned a price to the apple, the Father had already placed life, nourishment, reproduction, and continuation inside it. And before anyone could tell humanity what something was worth, the Most High had already determined what He created it for. That is where we have to begin. Because if we are going to understand the restoration of order, we first have to understand the order that was there in the beginning. And in the beginning, before man built Babylon, the Most High placed abundance inside seed. Chapter 1. In the beginning was seed. Go back to Genesis. Before man is even created, before Adam receives an assignment, before there is a garden to dress and keep, the Most High establishes something remarkable in the earth. Genesis 1:11-12 says,
And the Most High said, Let the earth bring forth grass, the herb yielding seed, and the fruit tree yielding fruit after his kind, whose seed is in itself upon the earth. And it was so. And the earth brought forth grass, an herb yielding seed after his kind, and the tree yielding fruit, whose seed was in itself after his kind. And the Father saw that it was good.
Before man enters the story, seed is already present. Before Adam can plant anything, the Father has already built reproductive capacity into creation. The grass brings forth, the herb yields seed, the fruit tree produces fruit, and the seed is in itself. Then Scripture repeats the pattern after his kind. That repetition matters. The creation is not random, it is ordered. The Most High establishes kinds, he establishes reproduction. He establishes continuity. He establishes a pattern through which what he creates is capable of continuing according to the order he placed within it. Pay attention to the architecture. The Most High could have created the first tree, and then personally placed every individual tree that would ever exist afterward. He could have created every future apple independently, every future grain, every future herb, every future field. But he didn't establish creation that way. He created something capable of continuing. He put reproductive potential inside the creation itself. He put tomorrow's tree inside today's fruit. He put tomorrow's field inside today's grain. He put tomorrow's harvest inside today's harvest. What appears to be provision for the present also contains productive capacity for the future. That means the abundance is not merely sitting on the outside where you can see it. Much of the abundance is hidden. It is encoded in seed. A person looking only at the immediate object may see one apple. The Father's design contains much more than one apple. A person may see one grain of wheat. But the grain contains the potential for a stalk. The stalk can contain many grains. Those grains can be planted again, and the cycle continues. So the Most High's abundance is not merely a pile of finished things. It is also productive potential operating according to order. That distinction is critical, because if abundance only meant possessing finished things, then every act of consumption would necessarily move us closer to lack. Every apple eaten would mean one fewer apple. Every grain consumed would mean one fewer grain. Eventually the supply would disappear. But the Father created something else inside the provision. Seed, something that allows what is consumed to be replaced. Something that allows what is harvested to be planted again. Something that allows one generation to participate in provision for the next. This is why Genesis 1:29 is so important. After creating man and woman, the Most High says,
Behold, I have given you every herb bearing seed, which is upon the face of all the earth, and every tree, in the which is the fruit of a tree yielding seed. To you it shall be for meat.
Notice again what is being emphasized. The herb is bearing seed. The fruit tree is yielding seed. The Father gives food, but he repeatedly identifies the seed inside the food. Why? Because the gift is not exhausted by the immediate act of eating. The fruit sustains you now. The seed points beyond now. The fruit answers present hunger. The seed carries potential for future provision. And that means when the Father gives fruit, he is not merely given something to consume. He has also given something to continue. That is where stewardship begins. You can eat the apple. There is nothing wrong with eating the apple. It was given for food. But if you understand only the flesh of the fruit and never understand the seed, then you understand only part of the gift. Because inside the thing you consume is something you are not supposed to consume blindly. There is something to recognize, something to preserve, something to cultivate, something capable of continuing beyond your immediate need. This is where the relationship between abundance and responsibility begins to appear. Suppose a generation receives a field full of fruit. They eat everything. They consume everything. They preserve nothing. They plant nothing. They cultivate nothing. For a moment, they may appear wealthy. Their tables may be full. Their storehouses may be overflowing. But if nothing is preserved that can produce what comes next, their abundance has no future. The abundance ends with them. That is not the Father's pattern. His pattern is not simply receive and consume. His pattern contains continuation, receive, eat, preserve, plant, cultivate, harvest, and within the harvest receive seed again. So seed changes the way we understand provision. The question is no longer simply, what do I have? That question is too small. The better question is, what did the Father place inside what I have? What did he intend this provision to become? What future possibility has been entrusted inside this present blessing? What must be consumed? What must be preserved? what must be cultivated, what must be allowed to reproduce. That is a different way of seeing wealth. Because from the perspective of the Father's order, the richest thing in your hand may not be the fruit you can consume today. It may be the seed capable of producing what does not yet exist. And this is why the statement is so important. The Father hid tomorrow's abundance inside today's provision. He put continuation inside creation. He put reproduction inside creation. He put productive potential inside creation. And he called it good. This also means that lack was not built into the original design as the governing principle. The creation is not presented as a closed system where man consumes until everything disappears. The creation is presented as something ordered to reproduce. That does not mean every harvest is guaranteed to succeed. It does not mean there can never be famine, drought, disease, failure, or consequences for disobedience. Scripture clearly shows otherwise. But it does mean that the underlying architecture established by the Most High is reproductive. Seedtime anticipates harvest. Fruit contains seed. Life is structured to continue, and this is the world Adam inherits. Adam does not enter a world where the first question is, where will provision come from? He enters a world where the Father has already placed provision and productive potential throughout the creation. Adam's question is different. His question is, what am I supposed to do with what the Father has already provided? That is the question of stewardship. And that is where we go next. Chapter 2. The world Adam received. When Adam opened his eyes, he did not awaken in an empty wilderness. He did not begin with nothing. The Most High had already prepared an environment. There was land. There was water. There were rivers, there were plants, there were trees, there was food, there were animals, there was beauty, there was order. There was productive capacity everywhere Adam looked. Genesis 2-8 says,
And the Most High, Father planted a garden eastward in Eden, and there he put the man whom he had formed.
The Father had already caused the ground to bring forth. There was provision, there was beauty, there was nourishment. The creation was already functioning before Adam began his work. Then Genesis 2:10 describes the river that went out of Eden to water the garden. Water was already moving. The ground was already productive. The trees were already growing. The ecosystem was already alive. Adam's first experience of creation was not scarcity, it was provision inside order. But provision did not eliminate responsibility. Genesis 2:15 says,
And the Most High took the man, and put him into the Garden of Eden to dress it and to keep it.
Those words matter. Adam was not placed there simply to consume. He was placed there to participate, to dress it, to keep it, to tend, to guard, to cultivate, to preserve, to steward. Adam's assignment tells us something fundamental about the Father's relationship with man. The Most High could have created a garden that required nothing from Adam. He could have made Adam a passive recipient. He did not. He gave Adam work. He gave Adam responsibility. He gave Adam something already good and then commanded him to participate faithfully in its continuation. That is stewardship. Adam did not own creation. He was entrusted with responsibility inside creation. That distinction will follow us through this entire teaching. The Father owns. The Father creates. The Father provides. The Father establishes the order. The Father entrusts. And man becomes accountable for what happens with what has been placed within his responsibility. That pattern is not limited to Eden. It will appear again with Israel. It will appear again with Judah. It will appear again in the words of Messiah. And it will become explicit in the parable of the talents. But the pattern begins here. The Father gives. Man stewards. Adam didn't have to invent the seed. He didn't have to invent soil. He didn't have to invent water. He didn't have to invent reproduction. He didn't have to create photosynthesis. He didn't have to establish seasons. He didn't have to invent the biological processes through which life reproduces. He didn't have to create the laws through which the earth functioned. The productive capacity was already there. His responsibility was to work faithfully within the order the Father had established. That is an important distinction, because there is a difference between creating abundance and cultivating abundance. Man does not originate the life inside the seed. Man does not command the seed to possess life. Man can plant. Man can water. Man can cultivate. Man can protect. But the life itself comes from an order the Father established. This is why Paul's language in 1 Corinthians 3-6 becomes so useful later.
I have planted, Apollos watered, but the Most High gave the increase.
Different context. Same principle of dependence. Man participates. The Father gives increase. So Adam wasn't commanded to manufacture abundance. He was commanded to cultivate what the Father had already provided. And cultivation requires humility, because the steward must recognize that he is working with something he did not create. The farmer can become skilled. He can learn the soil. He can understand the season. He can improve his methods. But he cannot take credit for creating the principle of life inside the seed. He participates in something larger than himself. That was Adam's position. He was powerful within creation, but he was not sovereign over creation. He had authority, but his authority existed beneath the authority of the one who placed him there. And this is where the restoration of order begins to become clearer. Order is not merely productivity. Order is productivity under rightful authority. Adam could not define for himself what the garden was for. The Father had already established purpose. Adam's work had meaning because it existed inside that purpose. And this principle went far beyond agriculture. Adam himself contained productive potential. Genesis 1:27-28 says,
So the Most High created man in his own image. In the image of Yah created he him. Male and female created he them. And the Most High blessed them, and he said unto them, Be fruitful, and multiply, and replenish the earth.
Be fruitful, multiply. Even humanity is placed inside the principle of continuation. The man contains generative capacity. The woman contains generative capacity. Their union contains generations that do not yet exist. Children, grandchildren, descendants, households, tribes, nations. None of those generations are visible in Adam when he first stands in Eden, but the capacity is present. Again, the Father places tomorrow inside what exists today. The same principle appears in Adam's mind. Adam possessed knowledge, but he did not possess all knowledge. Genesis 2:19-20 describes the animals being brought before Adam.
And out of the ground the Father, Most High, formed every beast of the field, and every fowl of the air, and brought them unto Adam to see what he would call them.
Adam observes. Adam distinguishes. Adam names. He exercises intelligence. He develops understanding through engagement with what the Father created. His mind had productive potential. His knowledge could grow. His understanding could deepen. His judgment could mature. His assignment contained possibilities he had not yet developed. His relationship with the Father contained instruction he had not yet fully experienced. There was somewhere for Adam to go. There was something for Adam to become. There was more to learn, more to understand, more to steward, more to develop. So the world Adam received was full of seed in more than one sense. The garden contained seed. The soil contained productive possibility. The animals carried reproduction after their kind. The man and woman carried generations. Adam's mind carried capacity for knowledge. His assignment carried capacity for development. His relationship with the Father carried the possibility of increasing wisdom through continued obedience. Everything around him pointed toward continuation. Everything pointed toward development. Everything pointed toward a world in which the Father gives potential and man faithfully cultivates what has been entrusted. And that makes what happens next even more significant. Because Adam was already in a process of receiving, already learning, already growing, already being entrusted. Yet another voice entered the garden and offered him something outside that process. The garden contained seed. Adam contained seed. His understanding was still developing. And instead of allowing what the Father had given him to come to maturity, humanity reached for something before its proper time. That is where we go next. Chapter 3. The seed of knowledge. We usually think of seed as something physical, something placed into soil, something watered, something that grows, something that eventually produces fruit. But once we understand the pattern of seed, we begin to see that the principle reaches beyond agriculture, because not everything the Father gives begins in its final form. Sometimes He gives a beginning, a capacity, an instruction, a revelation, a piece of understanding that must be cultivated before its full purpose becomes clear. And Adam is our first example. Adam was learning. He observed creation. He named. He worked. He kept. He received instruction. He experienced the Father's order. His knowledge was developing. His understanding was developing. His stewardship was developing. There were things Adam knew. There were things Adam had been told. There were things Adam had not yet experienced. And there were things the Father had explicitly placed outside the boundary of what he was permitted to take. Genesis 2:16-17 says,
And the Most High commanded the man, saying, Of every tree of the garden thou mayest freely eat, but of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil thou shalt not eat of it, for in the day that thou eatest thereof thou shalt surely die.
Notice what the command establishes. Adam is not abandoned without instruction. He is not confused about the boundary. The Father speaks plainly. There is liberty. Of every tree of the garden thou mayest freely eat. There is abundance. There is access. There is provision. But there is also a limit. One tree is prohibited. And that means Adam's relationship with knowledge is not autonomous. He does not determine for himself what knowledge should be taken when it should be taken, or by what means it should be acquired. The Father establishes the boundary. That is important, because knowledge by itself is not the highest good. Knowledge must remain beneath obedience. Understanding must remain beneath the authority of the one who created man. Adam did not awaken possessing every possible piece of knowledge in mature form. He had somewhere to grow. There was more to learn, more to experience, more to understand, more to become. And that is not a defect. That is development. A seed is not defective because it is not yet a tree. A child is not defective because he is not yet an elder. A beginning is not a failure because it has not yet reached maturity. The Father's order allows for growth. It allows for process. It allows for time. And then the serpent entered the garden. Genesis 3:1 says,
Now the serpent was more subtle than any beast of the field which the Most High had made.
The serpent begins by questioning the command.
Yea, hath the Most High said, Ye shall not eat of every tree of the garden?
The woman responds by repeating the boundary. Then the serpent directly contradicts what the Father said. Genesis 3:4-5.
And the serpent said unto the woman, Ye shall not surely die, for the Most High doth know that in the day ye eat thereof, then your eyes shall be opened, and ye shall be as gods, knowing good and evil.
Look carefully at the temptation. The serpent does not merely offer fruit, he offers a result. Your eyes shall be opened. Ye shall be as gods, knowing good and evil. The temptation is presented as immediate access to something desirable. No waiting, no submission, no trust, no continued development beneath the Father, no acceptance of the boundary. take the fruit, get the result. The Father's order required trust, relationship, instruction, obedience, experience, growth, maturity. The serpent offers another way, or perhaps more accurately, a way around the process. Take it now. Don't wait. Don't remain within the boundary. Don't allow the Father to determine the process. Don't allow the Father to determine the timing. Don't allow the Father to determine what is good for you to possess. Reach for the result yourself. Genesis 3-6 tells us what happens.
And when the woman saw that the tree was good for food, and that it was pleasant to the eyes, and a tree to be desired to make one wise, she took of the fruit thereof, and did eat.
There it is again. Desired to make one wise. The object is not merely food, it represents a desired outcome. Wisdom, knowledge, an open condition, something that appears to elevate the one who takes it. But the path to that result requires disobedience. And that distinction matters, because this is not merely a story about wanting knowledge. It is a story about reaching for something outside the order the Father established. The desire becomes detached from obedience. The result becomes more important than the command. And once that happens, the process has been corrupted. This gives us another way to understand the fall. The serpent offered Adam a harvest without seed time, a result without faithful cultivation, a perceived elevation without submission, knowledge without obedience to the one who determines its proper boundaries, fruit without the Father's process, and humanity reached for it. The tragedy is not that humanity wanted to grow. The Father had already created Adam with the capacity to grow. The tragedy is that humanity sought growth by stepping outside the order of the one who gave the capacity. That is a very different thing, because true maturity does not require rebellion. True wisdom does not require rejecting the source of wisdom. Proverbs 9:10 says,
The fear of the Most High is the beginning of wisdom, and the knowledge of the holy is understanding.
Wisdom begins with the proper relationship to the Most High. Reverence, submission, recognition of His authority. So when the serpent offers wisdom through disobedience, the offer is already corrupted at its foundation. It is promising maturity while severing the relationship through which true maturity is supposed to develop. This is why the seed metaphor matters. Knowledge can be seed. Understanding can be seed. Revelation can be seed. But seed must be cultivated inside the proper environment. Remove it from the order that sustains it, and the result can become distorted. The Father's process was not take whatever you desire and call the result wisdom. The process was receive, obey, learn, experience, grow, mature. That takes time, and time is exactly what the serpent attempts to bypass. The temptation is accelerated acquisition, immediate access, a shortcut to a desired state, and humanity accepts the shortcut. That pattern does not remain in Eden. We will see it repeatedly. People wanting harvest without seed time, wealth without stewardship, authority without service, knowledge without obedience, pleasure without responsibility, result without process. And every time the pattern appears, we are looking at the same underlying disorder. Something that should have matured under the Father's authority is seized outside His order. That is why this chapter matters to the larger teaching. The problem is not merely that Adam ate forbidden fruit. The problem is that humanity learned to desire the result while despising the process. And once that mindset enters the world, it can reach far beyond a garden. Because the Father's order still says, Seedtime. Then harvest. Not harvest first, not result first, not possession first. Seed time. Then harvest. And that is where we go next. Chapter 4. Seed time and harvest. After the flood, the Most High makes a declaration. The waters have receded. Noah has come out of the ark. He builds an altar. He offers unto the Most High. And then, at the beginning of this renewed world, the Father declares something about the continuation of the earth. Genesis 8:21-22 says,
And the Most High smelled a sweet savor, and the Father said in his heart, I will not again curse the ground any more for man's sake, for the imagination of man's heart is evil from his youth. Neither will I again smite any more everything living as I have done. While the earth remaineth, seedtime and harvest, and cold and heat, and summer and winter, and day and night shall not cease.
Listen carefully to that declaration. While the earth remaineth, there will be cold, there will be heat, there will be summer, there will be winter, there will be day, there will be night, and there will be seedtime and harvest. This is not merely a statement about farming. It is a declaration concerning the continuation of an ordered world. The flood has interrupted human civilization. Entire societies have disappeared. Possessions are gone. Cities are gone. Institutions are gone. Whatever systems humanity had built before the flood are gone. But the Father's order continues. Seedtime and harvest shall not cease. That should tell us something. Human systems can disappear. Human economies can disappear. Human institutions can disappear. But the productive order established by the Most High precedes them and continues beyond them. Seedtime and harvest. Now pay attention to the wording. Scripture does not simply say seed and harvest. It says seedtime and harvest. There is something between what is planted and what is produced. There is time. And time changes everything, because a seed is not a harvest. A seed contains the potential for harvest, but potential must pass through process. You plant, you cultivate, you protect, you water, you watch, you wait, you work. And there are things you cannot force. You cannot scream at a seed until it becomes a tree. You cannot threaten it into maturity. You cannot command tomorrow's harvest to appear this afternoon simply because you are impatient. You cannot plant this morning and become angry with the Father because the field isn't full by evening. There is an order. There is a season. There is development. There is maturity. Ecclesiastes 3:1-2 reminds us.
To everything there is a season, and a time to every purpose under the heaven, a time to be born, and a time to die, a time to plant, and a time to pluck up that which is planted.
There is a time to plant, and there is a time to gather what has been planted. The two moments are connected, but they are not the same moment. And the steward must learn how to live faithfully in the space between them. That space is important, because everybody enjoys talking about harvest. Harvest is visible. Harvest is exciting. Harvest is when the fruit appears. Harvest is when the field demonstrates what has been happening beneath the surface. But seedtime looks different. At seedtime, you can place something valuable into the ground and walk away appearing to have less than you had before. Think about that. You had seed in your hand. Now it is buried. You cannot eat what you planted. You cannot immediately show somebody the harvest. For a period of time, what you possessed has disappeared beneath the soil. But the steward understands something the consumer may not. Buried is not necessarily wasted. Sometimes what appears to have disappeared has actually entered the process for which it was created. That is faith. That is patience. That is stewardship. The farmer plants because he understands what seed is for. If he looked only at immediate consumption, he might eat everything. Why place perfectly good grain into dirt? Why give up something usable today for something that might come tomorrow? Because the steward understands seed time. He understands that some provision must be consumed, and some provision must be planted. The ability to distinguish between the two is part of wisdom. Consume all of the seed, and you may satisfy today's appetite while destroying tomorrow's harvest. Refuse to consume anything, and you fail to use the provision the Father gave for today. Stewardship requires understanding purpose. What is this for? Is it bread? Is it seed? Is part of it bread and part of it seed? What should sustain today? What must be preserved for tomorrow? That is a very different relationship with abundance. And Scripture repeatedly teaches that planting and harvest are connected through faithful process. Paul uses the agricultural principle in 1 Corinthians 3-6-7.
I have planted, Apollos watered, but the Most High gave the increase. So then neither is he that planteth anything, neither he that watereth, but the Most High that giveth the increase.
Paul is speaking about ministry, not agriculture. And that is precisely why the passage is useful here. He takes a principle everybody understands from cultivation and uses it to explain something spiritual. One plants, another waters, but neither creates the life. The Most High gives the increase. That establishes the proper relationship between stewardship and sovereignty. The steward matters. Planting matters. Watering matters. Cultivation matters. Faithfulness matters. But the steward is never the source. Man participates in a process whose underlying power he did not create. You can put the seed in the soil. You can water it. You can remove weeds. You can protect the field. You can learn better methods. You can become an excellent farmer. But you did not put life inside the seed. That belongs to the Father. So faithful stewardship requires both work and humility. You work because you have responsibility. You remain humble because the increase does not originate with you. And this is where the contrast with Eden becomes even clearer. In Eden, humanity reached for a result outside the Father's process. But Seedtime teaches us something different. It teaches us to remain inside the process, to do what has been assigned, to trust what the Father established, to allow time for what He provided to mature. That teaches us something about the kingdom. The Father's order is not built around instant gratification. It is built around faithful cultivation. Receive. Recognize what has been entrusted. Plant. Put what must reproduce into the environment where it can fulfill its purpose. Cultivate. Work with what the Father provided. Protect. Guard what is developing. Wait. Respect the process and the time required for maturity. Harvest. Receive what faithful cultivation has produced. But the pattern does not end there. Because when the harvest comes, don't consume everything. Look again. Inside the harvest is what? Seed. Tomorrow is sitting inside today again. The Father has brought you back to the beginning of the cycle. What was once seed became harvest. And now the harvest has produced seed. So preserve what must continue. Eat what was given for food. Share what should be shared. Store what should be stored. And preserve what must become the next planting. Then plant again. Seed time. Harvest. Seed time. Harvest. Generation after generation. The Father's provision moves through time. This is why Genesis 8:22 is so important to what we are building. The Most High is not describing a world of endless consumption. He is describing continuation. A world in which the present is connected to the future. A world in which what exists today contains responsibility for what should exist tomorrow. And that principle reaches much farther than agriculture. Because once you understand Seedtime and harvest, you begin to recognize that the Father has placed other kinds of beginnings into our hands. Things that do not look like harvest when we first receive them. A word, an instruction, an opportunity, a skill, an act of compassion, a piece of knowledge, a revelation, a child, a responsibility, something small, something unfinished, something that must be cultivated before anyone can see what it can become. And perhaps we have overlooked some of the Father's greatest provisions because we were looking for finished fruit, when what He placed in our hands was seed. This is not merely agriculture. This is a pattern. And once we recognize the pattern, we begin to see seed everywhere. Chapter 5. Everything has a seed. Once you see the pattern, you begin recognizing it everywhere. Seed is not only something buried in soil. Seed is a beginning, a capacity, a possibility. Something that may look small when it is first received, but which can become much greater if it is cultivated faithfully. That is why the seed principle reaches far beyond agriculture. The Father can give you a seed of revelation. You see something in his word that you did not understand before. A passage opens. A connection becomes visible. A truth that was always present suddenly becomes clear. But revelation is not the end. What do you do with it? Do you study it? Do you test it against the word? Do you walk in it? Do you allow it to correct you? Do you allow it to change your behavior? Because revelation that never becomes obedience remains unfinished. James 1:22 says,
But be ye doers of the word, and not hearers only, deceiving your own selves.
The word is received, but receiving is only the beginning. If revelation becomes obedience, then obedience becomes experience. Experience becomes testimony. And testimony can plant understanding in someone else. Now, what began as a seed in one person has reproduced. Paul describes a similar pattern in 2 Timothy 2:2.
And the things that thou hast heard of me among many witnesses, the same commit thou to faithful men, who shall be able to teach others also.
Look at the movement. Paul receives. Timothy receives. Faithful men receive. Then they become capable of teaching others also. The truth does not stop with the one who first receives it. It continues. That is seed. The Father can give you a seed of knowledge. You learn something. At first, perhaps it is only information, but knowledge can be cultivated into understanding. Understanding can mature into wisdom. Wisdom can become righteous judgment, and righteous judgment can guide a household, a community, or another generation. Proverbs 4:7 says,
Wisdom is the principal thing, therefore get wisdom, and with all thy getting, get understanding.
Knowledge is not supposed to remain raw. It is supposed to mature. It is supposed to become useful. It is supposed to shape conduct. It is supposed to help distinguish what is right from what is wrong. Then that wisdom can be transmitted. Deuteronomy 6:6-7 gives us the generational pattern.
And these words which I command thee this day shall be in thine heart, and thou shalt teach them diligently unto thy children.
The commandment enters the heart of one generation. Then it is taught to the next. And when the next generation receives it faithfully, the word continues beyond the life of the person who first taught it. That is seed. The Father can give you a seed of service. You serve someone. Perhaps the act seems small. You help someone carry a burden. You prepare food. You teach. You repair something. You care for someone who is weak. You use your strength for someone who does not have enough strength in that moment. The service may last only a few minutes, but what can come from it? A person is strengthened. A burden is reduced. Someone is able to stand again. Someone learns what faithful service looks like. And perhaps that person later serves somebody else. Now service is reproduced. Messiah taught this pattern directly. Mark 10:43-45 says,
But so shall it not be among you, but whosoever will be great among you shall be your minister, and whosoever of you will be the chiefest shall be servant of all. For even the Son of Man came not to be ministered unto, but to minister.
In the kingdom, service is not weakness. It is productive. It creates order. It strengthens others. It allows the gifts of one person to become provision for another. The Father can also give you a seed of compassion. Compassion begins inside. You see someone suffering. You recognize the burden. You are moved. But if compassion ends only as emotion, it has not yet reached its full purpose. Compassion becomes action. Action may produce relief. Relief may help restore someone, and the restored person may become capable of helping another. 1 John 3:17-18 asks,
But whoso hath this world's good, and seeth his brother have need, and shutteth up his bowels of compassion from him, how dwelleth the love of the Most High in him? My little children, let us not love in word, neither in tongue, but in deed and in truth.
Compassion must move. The seed has to become fruit. Love that remains only language has not yet become what it was intended to become. The Father can give you ability, a seed of skill. Perhaps at first you only have aptitude. You notice things others do not notice. You work well with your hands. You understand numbers. You can organize. You can teach. You can build. You can create. You can solve problems. But raw ability is not yet mastery. So you develop it. You practice. You discipline yourself. You learn. You fail. You improve. Skill becomes craftsmanship. Craftsmanship produces something useful. Then something else happens. You teach the craft to somebody else. Now what was once inside one person continues beyond him. Scripture gives us an extraordinary example in Exodus 31 to 1-5.
And the Father spake unto Moses, saying, See, I have called by name Bezaleel the son of Uri, the son of Hur, of the tribe of Judah, and I have filled him with the Spirit of Yah, in wisdom, and in understanding, and in knowledge, and in all manner of workmanship, to devise cunning works.
Notice the combination. Wisdom, understanding, knowledge, workmanship. The skill itself becomes part of faithful service. The Father gives ability so that something can be built according to his purpose. And when skill is cultivated faithfully, the gift becomes useful beyond the person who possesses it. Even family demonstrates the seed pattern. Genesis 1:28 says,
And the Most High blessed them, and the Father said unto them, Be fruitful, and multiply, and replenish the earth.
A man and woman possess generative capacity. But again, generation is not merely biological. Children come. Then those children must be taught. They must be instructed, corrected, protected, prepared. They mature, they become men and women. And then they become capable of carrying covenant knowledge, wisdom, skill, and responsibility into another generation. Psalm 78 to 5:7 describes that generational responsibility.
For he established a testimony in Jacob, and appointed a law in Israel, which he commanded our fathers, that they should make them known to their children, that the generation to come might know them, even the children which should be born, who should arise and declare them to their children, that they might set their hope in the Most High.
Look at the movement. Fathers, children, children not yet born, then their children. The revelation continues because somebody faithfully transmits what was entrusted, that is seed, and now the pattern is becoming impossible to miss. The Father gives something. It may look small. It may look incomplete. It may not yet resemble the harvest, but inside it is possibility. Revelation can become obedience. Knowledge can become wisdom. Wisdom can become righteous judgment. Service can become restored strength. Compassion can become relief. Ability can become craftsmanship. Craftsmanship can become provision. Teaching can become another teacher. A child can become a faithful man or woman who instructs another generation. The Father repeatedly places something into our hands whose intended purpose is larger than its present form. And this should change the way we look at what He gives, because perhaps the thing in your hand is not small. Perhaps it is simply early. Perhaps you are judging the seed because it does not yet look like the tree. Perhaps you are despising the beginning because you cannot yet see the harvest. Zechariah 4:10 asks,
For who hath despised the day of small things?
Small does not mean insignificant. A seed is small, but its smallness says nothing about the size of what may come from it. The question is whether it is recognized, whether it is protected, whether it is cultivated, whether it is allowed to fulfill its purpose. And now we arrive at the unavoidable question. If the Father places productive potential into our hands, if revelation is seed, if knowledge is seed, if service is seed, if compassion is seed, if skill is seed, if generational responsibility is seed, what does the Father expect us to do with it? Does He merely expect us to preserve what we received? Is faithfulness simply returning the gift untouched? Or does stewardship require something more? Messiah answers that question, and he answers it in a parable about a master, his servants, what he entrusted to them, and what he expected to find when he returned. Chapter 6. What did you do with the seed? In Matthew 25, Messiah tells the parable of the talents. And this parable gives us one of the clearest pictures in Scripture of what faithful stewardship actually looks like. Matthew 25:14 begins.
For the kingdom of heaven is as a man traveling into a far country, who called his own servants and delivered unto them his goods.
That detail matters. His goods. The servants did not create them. The servants did not originally own them. The master possessed them. Then the master made a decision. He entrusted what belonged to him into the hands of his servants. That is stewardship. The servant has real responsibility. But the servant is not the ultimate owner. The servant has authority to act, but that authority exists beneath the one who entrusted the goods. And that makes this parable extraordinarily important to everything we've been building. The pattern is the same pattern we saw with Adam. The Father owns. The Father provides. The Father entrusts. And the servant becomes accountable for what happens with what was placed into his hands. Matthew 25:15 says.
And unto one he gave 5 talents, to another 2, and to another 1, to every man according to his several ability, and straightway took his journey.
One receives 5, another receives 2, another receives 1. Different amounts, different capacities, different assignments, but each servant receives something, and each servant now has responsibility. The servant with 5 does not sit and admire what he has received. He acts. Matthew 25:16 says,
Then he that had received the 5 talents went and traded with the same, and made them other 5 talents.
5 becomes 10. The servant with 2 does the same. Verse 17.
And likewise he that had received 2, he also gained other 2.
Becomes 4. Something important is happening. What the master entrusted does not remain static. It becomes productive in the hands of faithful servants. The 5 produce 5 more. The 2 produce 2 more. The master's property is not merely protected. It is developed. It is put to work. It produces increase. Then we come to the third servant. Matthew 25:18 says,
But he that had received 1 went and digged in the earth, and hid his Lord's money.
He digs. He buries. He hides what was entrusted. And then time passes. Verse 19 says,
After a long time, the Lord of those servants cometh, and reckoneth with them.
There it is. The accounting. The master returns. And what had been entrusted now has to be examined. This is where stewardship becomes accountability. The servants do not simply receive, they eventually answer. The servant with 5 comes first. Matthew 25:20-21 says,
And so he that had received 5 talents came and brought other 5 talents, saying, Lord, thou deliveredst unto me 5 talents. Behold, I have gained beside them 5 talents more. His Lord said unto him, Well done, thou good and faithful servant.
Notice the language. Good, faithful. The master is not merely impressed by the total. He identifies the servant's character. Faithfulness is revealed in what happened with the entrusted goods. Then the servant with 2 comes. Matthew 25:22-23.
He also that had received 2 talents came and said, Lord, thou deliveredst unto me 2 talents. Behold, I have gained 2 other talents beside them. His Lord said unto him, Well done, good and faithful servant.
It's exactly the same approval. That matters. The servant who received 2 is not condemned because he did not return 5 more. He wasn't given 5. He was accountable for the 2 placed into his hands. This gives us one of the most important principles in the entire episode. The amount wasn't the test. Stewardship was the test. The Father does not judge the servant for failing to produce from what the servant was never given. He examines what happened with what was actually entrusted. That means comparison can become a distraction. One servant may have 5, another may have 2, another may have 1. The question is not whether everybody begins with the same measure. The question is whether the servant is faithful with the measure he actually received. Now the third servant comes, and this is where the parable becomes extraordinarily important to our seed framework. Matthew 25-24:25 says,
Then he which had received the 1 talent came and said, Lord, I knew thee, that thou art an hard man. And I was afraid, and went and hid thy talent in the earth. Lo, there thou hast that is thine.
Listen to what he is able to say. There thou hast that is thine. He can return what he received. He did not spend it all. He did not lose it. Nobody stole it from him. He can still produce the original amount. If preservation by itself were the definition of faithfulness, then this servant would appear successful. He kept it, he protected it, he returned it. But the master is not pleased. Matthew 25-26:27 says,
His Lord answered and said unto him, Thou wicked and slothful servant, thou oughtest therefore to have put my money to the exchangers, and then at my coming I should have received mine own with usury.
The master expected productive use. That is the issue. The servant had been entrusted with something that had capacity, and he chose to make it inactive. He buried productive possibility. He prevented what was placed in his hands from moving toward increase. And now the seed principle gives us language for what happened. He returned the seed without the harvest. That is the problem. He preserved the original thing, but he did not bring it toward the purpose implied by the entrustment. He protected the potential while refusing to cultivate it. He kept the beginning from becoming more than the beginning, and that forces us to expand our understanding of stewardship. Preservation matters. We have spent this entire Judah arc talking about preservation. Preserve the covenant. Preserve the promise. Preserve what was entrusted. Guard it. Keep it. Carry it forward. But preservation is not always the final objective. Sometimes preservation exists so that something can reach its appointed purpose. Seed is preserved so it can be planted. Knowledge is preserved so it can be taught. Truth is preserved so it can be lived. Skill is preserved so it can be practiced and transmitted. Covenant is preserved so another generation can walk in it. Promise is preserved until fulfillment. So yes, preserve what the Father entrusted, but don't stop there. Cultivate what the Father entrusted, and bring it toward the purpose for which it was entrusted. This is where the parable of the talents becomes much larger than money. Messiah uses talents in the parable, but the stewardship principle reaches into everything the Father places under our responsibility. If he gives you knowledge, there is responsibility. What did the knowledge become? Did it remain information? Or did it become understanding? Did understanding become wisdom? Did wisdom become righteous action? If he gives you revelation, there is responsibility. Did you merely hear it? Or did revelation become obedience? Did obedience become experience? Did experience become testimony? Did testimony strengthen someone else? If he gives you strength, there is responsibility. Did your strength serve only you? Or did somebody weaker become stronger because you were present? If he gives you compassion, there is responsibility. Did you merely feel something? Or did compassion become action? If he gives you resources, there is responsibility. Were they only consumed? Or did they also become provision, opportunity, protection, or increase? If he gives you skill, there is responsibility. Did you bury ability? Or did ability become craftsmanship? Did craftsmanship become something useful? Did the craft continue beyond you? If he gives you the ability to teach, there is responsibility. Did knowledge die with you? Or did someone else become able to teach because you taught faithfully? If he gives you the ability to build, there is responsibility. What did you build? Who did it serve? What continued because you used what was in your hands? And if he gives humanity the capacity to produce another generation, there is responsibility there too. Generative capacity is not meaningless. It has purpose. It creates obligation. It reaches beyond the immediate moment into tomorrow. We will return to that principle later. But for now, stay with the parable. The master returns. And the question is not simply, did you still have what I gave you? The deeper question is, what happened to what I gave you while it was in your hands? That is stewardship. And this is why the language of seed fits so powerfully. A seed can be preserved and still fail its purpose. Put it in a glass case. Protect it from everything. Never let it touch soil. Never risk it. Never plant it. At the end of the season, you may still possess the seed, but you have no harvest. You can say, there thou hast, that is thine, and still have failed the purpose of the entrustment. That is sobering, because it means faithfulness is not merely about avoiding loss. It is also about allowing what the Father provided to become what He intended. So the question is not merely what did the Father give you? That question is only the beginning. The real question is, what did what the Father gave you become in your hands? What did the seed become? What did the revelation become? What did the knowledge become? What did the strength become? What did the compassion become? What did the skill become? What did the resources become? What did the family become? What did the responsibility become? What did the promise become? And now, after everything we have walked through in this Judah arc, we are finally ready to ask that question of Judah. Because Judah was entrusted with something. Judah preserved something. Judah carried something through generations. But preservation was not the end. The seed was going somewhere. The promise was moving toward harvest. And now we can finally see what Judah had been preserving. Chapter 7. From Adam to Judah to the lion. We began this Judah arc with a question. Why did Judah go first? Why was Judah repeatedly positioned at the front? Why did responsibility keep falling upon this house? What had Judah been entrusted to preserve? And across this journey we have watched stewardship tested, responsibility, compromise, assimilation, Babylon, preservation, promise, and finally, the lion. Now the language of seed gives us another way to understand the entire journey. Because Judah was not preserving something merely so Judah could say we still have it. Preservation was necessary because what had been entrusted was going somewhere. The promise had a harvest. The covenant had a direction. The house was carrying something forward. The scepter pointed forward. The prophetic promises pointed forward. The preserved identity pointed forward. The preserved expectation pointed forward. Judah was carrying something through time that was not supposed to terminate in Judah. It was supposed to come to fruition. That principle appears all the way back in Genesis. Genesis 49 to 8:10 says,
Judah, thou art he whom thy brethren shall praise. Thy hand shall be in the neck of thine enemies. Thy father's children shall bow down before thee. Judah is a lion's whelp. From the prey, my son, thou art gone up. The scepter shall not depart from Judah, nor a lawgiver from between his feet, until Shiloh come.
The scepter is connected to Judah. Authority is connected to Judah. Expectation is connected to Judah. But even there, the text points beyond Judah himself, until Shiloh come. The house is preserving something that is moving towards someone. Something is being carried forward. Something is expected. Something has not yet reached its final form. That is seed language. The promise exists. But the harvest is still ahead. Judah must survive long enough for what has been entrusted to come to fruition. That makes preservation an act of stewardship. The house must continue. The identity must continue. The covenant memory must continue. The prophetic expectation must continue. The line must continue. Because what the Father has placed inside Judah has not yet finished becoming what He intended. And this is where the entire arc begins to come together. Judah goes first. Judah bears responsibility. Judah compromises. Judah experiences the consequences of disorder. Judah lives inside Babylon. Judah must preserve the promise even while surrounded by another order. And through all of it, the question remains, what happens to what the Father entrusted? Does it disappear? Does it become absorbed? Does it become corrupted beyond recognition? Or does the seed remain alive long enough to reach its appointed harvest? This is why preservation mattered. Not because preservation itself was the destination. Preservation protected possibility. Preservation carried something forward. Preservation kept the seed until the appointed time. That pattern is larger than Judah. We saw it with Adam. Adam received something from the Father and was expected to cultivate it. The original order was entrusted. Humanity failed in stewardship. But the Father's purpose did not disappear. It continued moving. The covenant continued. The promise continued. Responsibility continued. And eventually that responsibility becomes concentrated in houses, tribes, servants, prophets, kings, and finally in the one who fulfills what the others could not. The Lion, Messiah, the perfect steward. Episode 6 showed us something extraordinary. He receives enormous authority. He receives a kingdom assignment. He confronts rebellion. He judges. He restores. He defeats every enemy. He stands in power that no ordinary ruler could possess. But none of that power causes him to forget where the authority came from. That is what makes him the perfect steward. John 6:38 gives us his posture plainly.
For I came down from heaven, not to do mine own will, but the will of him that sent me.
That is stewardship language. He has an assignment. He has authority, but his will remains submitted to the one who sent him. John 5:30 says,
I can of mine own self do nothing, because I seek not mine own will, but the will of the Father which hath sent me.
Again, not my will, the Father's will, not autonomous authority, entrusted authority, not possession without accountability, stewardship beneath the one who sent him. This is why power never defined the lion. Faithfulness did. The lion is not great merely because he can conquer. He is great because he remains faithful while possessing the power to conquer. He does not use authority to establish himself outside the Father. He uses authority to complete the Father's purpose. That becomes unmistakable in 1 Corinthians 15:24-28. Paul writes,
Then cometh the end, when he shall have delivered up the kingdom to the Most High, even the Father.
and then,
For he must reign, till he hath put all enemies under his feet.
he reigns, he defeats, he subdues. He exercises authority until every enemy is beneath his feet. Then verse 28 says,
And when all things shall be subdued unto him, then shall the Son also himself be subject unto him, that put all things under him, that the Most High may be all in all.
There is the completed stewardship. He receives authority. He faithfully exercises authority. He accomplishes the assignment. He does not confuse stewardship with ownership. He does not confuse delegated authority with ultimate authority. He remains submitted. The perfect steward brings the entrusted assignment to completion. And now the seed principle becomes visible again. What was preserved through generations comes to fruition in the lion. The scepter reaches its appointed ruler. The promise reaches fulfillment. The house that carried expectation produces the one toward whom the expectation pointed. The preserved seed reaches harvest. That is why Judah's story cannot end with preservation alone. Judah was not called merely to remain. Judah was called to carry forward what the Father intended to bring forth. And that gives us a larger way to understand faithful preservation. Preservation is not fearfully freezing something in place. It is protecting what must survive until its purpose can be fulfilled. A farmer preserves seed because he expects another planting. A father preserves truth because he expects another generation. A steward preserves resources because they still have work to do. Judah preserves the promise because the promise is still moving toward fulfillment. And the lion becomes the ultimate demonstration of what happens when what the Father entrusts is brought faithfully toward its intended purpose. From Adam to Judah to the lion, the issue remains stewardship. Adam receives, Judah preserves, Messiah fulfills, and in Messiah the pattern is restored. The servant is faithful. The authority is rightly exercised. The assignment is completed. The kingdom is established. And everything remains beneath the authority of the Most High. So now we are finally prepared to ask the question that this entire arc has been moving toward. If this is what perfect stewardship looks like, if the lion restores what Adam disrupted, if the promise preserved through Judah reaches fulfillment, then what does the world look like beneath that kind of stewardship? What happens when authority is no longer separated from faithfulness? What happens when productive capacity is no longer wasted? What happens when seed is cultivated according to purpose? What happens when the steward understands that what he is belongs ultimately to the Father? What happens when harvest is not consumed without thought for what comes next? What happens when humanity is restored to its proper relationship with what the Most High entrusted? It looks like restored order. Not merely a restored throne. Not merely a restored city. Not merely a restored nation. A restored relationship between the Father, the steward, the seed, and the harvest. And that is where we go next. Chapter 8. The restoration of abundance. The restoration of the kingdom is not merely a throne. It is not merely a crown. It is not merely a righteous king sitting in Jerusalem while everybody else waits to receive something. Restored order means humanity returns to its proper relationship with what the Father entrusted. That means the kingdom is not passive. It is productive. The farmer plants. The builder builds. The craftsman produces. The teacher teaches. The parent instructs. The elder counsels. The servant serves. The compassionate restore. The knowledgeable transmit knowledge. The wise administer. People cultivate what has been placed into their hands. And this is where the restoration of abundance must be understood correctly. Abundance is not merely the presence of a large quantity of finished things. It is not simply full storehouses. It is not simply wealth accumulated in one place. It is not even merely having enough for today. Biblically, abundance is connected to functioning order. It is productive capacity operating according to purpose. The land produces. The seed reproduces. The labor bears fruit. The household becomes stable. Knowledge is passed on. Skill is developed. Wisdom is applied. The vulnerable are not abandoned. The next generation is prepared. The harvest feeds people. And the harvest also contains tomorrow. Because inside the harvest is seed. That is the difference. The harvest answers present need. The seed preserves future possibility. The Father's abundance is therefore not exhausted by the moment of consumption. It is built to continue. Genesis 8:22 already gave us the pattern.
While the earth remaineth, seed time and harvest.
Seed time. Harvest. Then said time again. Then harvest again. Continuation. And Deuteronomy gives us another picture of what abundance looks like when the people walk inside the Father's order. Deuteronomy 28:4 says,
Blessed shall be the fruit of thy body, and the fruit of thy ground, and the fruit of thy cattle.
Fruit. Increase. Reproduction. The pattern appears again. Then verse 8 says,
The Most High shall command the blessing upon thee in thy storehouses, and in all that thou settest thine hand unto.
notice the language. Not merely what you possess, what you set your hand unto. Work, stewardship, productivity. The blessing touches what is faithfully done. This does not mean every righteous person will become materially rich. That would reduce the principle to something Scripture does not teach. The deeper point is that the Father's order is not built around barrenness. It is built around fruitfulness. Where He entrusts capacity, He expects faithful use. Where He gives seed, He establishes the possibility of harvest. Where He gives ability, He expects stewardship. And that is why the restored kingdom must be filled with functioning stewards. The farmer does not sit waiting for bread to fall from the sky while seed rots in his hand. He plants. The builder does not complain that there is no shelter while refusing to use the tools and ability entrusted to him. He builds. The teacher does not hoard knowledge. He teaches. The parent does not merely produce children biologically and then abandon the work of formation. The parent instructs. Deuteronomy 6:6-7 says,
And these words which I command thee this day shall be in thine heart, and thou shalt teach them diligently unto thy children.
The parent becomes a steward of transmission. The elder does not carry decades of experience into the grave without giving anything back. The elder counsels. The skilled worker does not bury ability. He produces. The compassionate do not simply feel, they act. The wise do not use understanding only for themselves. They administer. Everyone has something to steward. This is what makes the parable of the talents so important to the restored kingdom. The Father's people are not merely recipients of blessing. They are stewards inside an ecosystem of blessing. What one person faithfully cultivates can become provision for someone else. The farmer's harvest becomes food. The builder's work becomes shelter. The teacher's knowledge becomes understanding in another mind. The parent's instruction becomes order in another generation. The craftsman's skill becomes something useful. The servant's labor strengthens another household. The compassionate person's action becomes relief. The elder's wisdom prevents someone else from repeating an old failure. One person's faithful stewardship becomes another person's provision. And then the person who receives that provision may possess seed of his own. Now the order begins to multiply. That is abundance. Not endless consumption, not endless accumulation. Not one person holding everything while everyone else waits. Productive capacity functioning according to the Father's purpose. This is why 2 Corinthians 9:10 gives us language worth paying attention to.
Now he that ministereth seed to the sower both minister bread for your food, and multiply your seed sown.
Seed to the sower, bread for food. Increase. Again, the distinction appears. Some of what is provided becomes bread. Some of what is provided remains seed. Provision for today, productive capacity for tomorrow. That is wise stewardship. And it means abundance requires discernment. If everything becomes bread, there is nothing to plant. If everything remains seed, nobody eats. The steward must understand purpose. What is for consumption? What is for cultivation? What is for distribution? What is for preservation? What must be passed to the next generation? What must be planted now so that someone else can harvest later? That last question matters, because true stewardship reaches beyond the steward's own lifetime. A person can plant a tree whose full shade he may never sit beneath. He can teach a child who will one day teach grandchildren he may never meet. He can preserve knowledge that someone else will use decades later. He can build something that continues serving after he is gone. That is what seed does. Seed forces us to think beyond ourselves. It makes tomorrow part of today's responsibility. That is why today's blessing carries responsibility for tomorrow. The person who receives abundance must ask not only, what can I consume? But, what must continue? What must remain fruitful after me? What must I preserve so that the next generation does not begin from nothing? This is also why the language of inheritance matters in Scripture. Proverbs 13:22 says,
A good man leaveth an inheritance to his children's children.
The horizon stretches beyond the child to the children's children. Why? Because righteous stewardship thinks generationally. It does not consume the entire harvest in one lifetime. It leaves something that can continue. And this reveals why wasting what the Father entrusts is so serious. When you waste seed, you are not necessarily wasting only what is presently in your hand. You may be wasting what was supposed to come from it. The seed looks small. The loss may appear small, but the potential loss may be enormous. Waste a seed and you may lose a tree. Lose the tree and you lose fruit. Lose the fruit and you lose more seed. Lose the seed and you lose another generation of trees. That is why waste can reach into the future. And the same principle applies beyond agriculture. Waste knowledge and someone may have to rediscover what should have been taught. Waste skill and a craft may disappear. Waste revelation and obedience never develops. Waste compassion and a person who could have been restored may remain broken. Waste family responsibility and the consequences can move through generations. Waste productive capacity and what should have multiplied ends with you. The loss is not always visible immediately. Sometimes the greatest loss is what never gets the chance to exist. The generations, the knowledge, the service, the fruit, the harvest, the future. That is why restored order must include restored stewardship. Not merely more things, not merely more possession, but the faithful use of what the Father has placed in the hands of His people. The restored kingdom is abundant because the people are functioning inside the Father's purpose. Seed is planted. Knowledge is transmitted. Skills are developed. Families are instructed. Resources are stewarded. Compassion moves. Service multiplies. The harvest sustains life. And the harvest contains seed for what comes next. That is abundance. Seed produces harvest. Harvest sustains life. Harvest contains seed. Seed produces another harvest. The pattern keeps moving. The blessing keeps moving. The responsibility keeps moving. And now we have reached the edge of another question. Because once you understand abundance this way, you begin to notice something strange about the world around us. You begin to notice that what the Father created to reproduce can be treated as though its only purpose is to be consumed. You begin to notice that what sustains life can be assigned less value than things that do not sustain life at all. You begin to notice that the seed itself can become something people seek to control, but that is another conversation. For now, stay with the apple. Chapter 9. Look at the apple again. We began with an apple. And I asked you a question. How many apples are in one seed? By now you understand why that question matters. The apple is food. It nourishes. It sustains life. But the apple is more than something to consume. It contains seed. And the seed contains productive capacity. The seed can become a tree. The tree can produce fruit. The fruit can contain more seed. And what begins in one small seed can continue into harvest after harvest. Genesis 1:11 says,
Let the earth bring forth grass, the herb yielding seed, and the fruit tree yielding fruit after his kind, whose seed is in itself.
Whose seed is in itself. The continuation is built into the provision. Before man assigned a price to the apple, the Father had already given it purpose, food, seed, continuation, possibility, so now place something else beside it. Currency. An apple in one hand, currency in the other. And consider the difference carefully. Which one can actually be eaten? Which one nourishes the body? Which one contains seed? Which one can participate directly in producing another generation of what it is? Which one did the Father create? And which one functions as value because human beings collectively established a system in which it represents value? That does not make currency inherently wicked. Scripture recognizes buying, selling, wages, money, weights, measures. Leviticus 19:35-36 says,
Ye shall do no unrighteousness in judgment, in meat yard, in weight, or in measure. Just balances, just weights, a just ephah, and a just hin shall ye have.
The existence of exchange is not the issue. The existence of price is not the issue. The question is deeper. Have we confused the representation of value with value itself? The apple does not become nutritious because somebody places a price tag on it. The seed does not wait for a government to recognize its productive capacity. Water does not begin sustaining life because somebody sells it. Soil does not become fertile because somebody appraises the land. The productive properties existed before the monetary measurement. The Father placed them there. Man came afterward and assigned a number. That number can be useful. It can facilitate exchange. It can compare transactions. It can help organize trade. But the number did not create the thing it measures. The price did not put nourishment inside the apple. Currency did not put life inside the seed. The market did not establish the productive order. The Father did. So there are two questions that we must stop treating as though they are identical. The first is, what is this worth in the marketplace? The second is, what did the Father create this to do? Those are not always the same question. Water may cost very little while being absolutely necessary for life. A seed may sell cheaply while carrying productive potential far beyond its purchase price. A grandmother can pour decades of wisdom into her grandchildren and never receive a wage for it. A father can devote years to forming his children and no financial statement will record the full value of what he gave. A servant can strengthen someone who has nothing with which to repay him. A teacher can plant knowledge whose fruit may not appear for years. A farmer can produce an abundant harvest that feeds many people while the price of the crop falls because the harvest was so successful. So when we use currency as the only lens through which we recognize value, we can become blind to forms of wealth that were never created to be measured completely by money. Messiah warns us about that danger. Matthew 6:19-21 says,
Lay not up for yourselves treasures upon earth, where moth and rust doth corrupt, and where thieves break through and steal, but lay up for yourselves treasures in heaven. For where your treasure is, there will your heart be also.
Messiah forces us to ask, what do we call treasure? What do we pursue? What do we protect? What do we trust? What organizes our decisions? Then he says in Matthew 6:24,
No man can serve two masters. Ye cannot serve the Most High and Mammon.
Notice the word serve. Money can be used, but it must not become master. A medium of exchange can remain an instrument, but when obedience becomes subordinate to the instrument, something has changed. We will examine that much more deeply later. For now, return to the apple. The apple has purpose before it has price. The seed has productive capacity before anybody assigns it monetary value. So ask a different question. Which measurement tells us what the apple is actually for? Its price, or the purpose the Father placed inside it? Now let us make the contrast harder. Suppose the orchard has an extraordinary year. Trees everywhere produce. The harvest is full. Apples are plentiful. There is more food, more seed, more productive potential. From the standpoint of provision, abundance has increased. But when supply rises relative to demand, what can happen to the monetary price? It can fall. Now suppose the opposite occurs. The harvest is poor. Apples become scarce. There is less food. less seed, less immediate abundance. And what can happen to the monetary price? It can rise. Now stop there. Do not rush past what that reveals. There can be more physical abundance and a lower price. There can be less physical abundance and a higher price. That does not make supply and demand wicked. It tells us that supply and demand pricing and life-sustaining abundance are measuring different things. One asks what something commands in exchange under particular conditions. The other asks what actually exists, what it can do, and what it can continue producing. Those are not the same measurement. And once that distinction becomes visible, a much larger question appears. What happens when a society begins organizing itself around the assigned value rather than the created purpose? That is the question I want you to carry forward. Not the answer, the question. Because now the apple has shown us two worlds of measurement. The Father's order says, here is provision, here is seed. Cultivate it, let it multiply. Let the harvest sustain life. Preserve what must continue. Man's system can look at that same abundance and assign it a price. Those two things can coexist, but they are not identical. And if we forget which one came first, the symbol can begin to obscure the substance. So, look at the apple again. Do not look first at what it costs. Look at what it does. Food, seed, continuation, harvest, future. Then look at the currency beside it. One represents value inside a system. The other contains something the Father actually created to sustain and continue life. And now we are finally prepared for the question that must carry us into the conclusion of this episode. What happens when mankind begins valuing the representation more highly than the abundance it was created to represent? Hold that question. Because before we examine the world humanity built around it, we have one thing left to do. We have to restore the order. Final chapter. Restore the order. Before we examine what humanity built, we need to remember what the Father established. He created, He provided, He placed seed inside creation, He gave humanity productive capacity, He assigned stewardship, He established seedtime and harvest. He expects His servants to be faithful with what He entrusts. And when His order is restored, humanity does not merely receive. Humanity returns to faithful stewardship. That is the point. The restoration of order is not simply the return of righteous authority from above. It is also the restoration of righteous responsibility below. The king is faithful. The stewards become faithful. Creation is no longer approached merely as something to consume. It is understood again as something entrusted. Psalm 24:1 says,
The earth is the Father's, and the fullness thereof, the world, and they that dwell therein.
That establishes ownership. The earth belongs to the Most High. The fullness belongs to Him. We are not the source. We are stewards. We did not create the seed. We did not create the soil. We did not create water. We did not create light. We did not create life. We did not create the reproductive order. We did not create the capacity of the mind to learn. We did not create the human ability to love, serve, teach, build, cultivate, or produce another generation. The Father gave. And what He gives carries purpose. So restore the relationship between seed and purpose. Do not look at seed merely as something small. Ask what it was created to become. Restore knowledge to wisdom. Proverbs 2-6 says,
For the Most High giveth wisdom, out of His mouth cometh knowledge and understanding.
Knowledge should not merely accumulate. It should mature into understanding. Understanding should produce righteous judgment. Restore revelation to obedience. James 1:22 says,
But be ye doers of the word, and not hearers only, deceiving your own selves.
the word should become visible in the life of the one who receives it. Restore authority to service. Messiah says in Mark 10:43-45,
Whosoever will be great among you shall be your minister, and whosoever of you will be the chiefest shall be servant of all. For even the Son of Man came not to be ministered unto, but to minister.
authority is not given so the steward can consume everyone beneath him. Authority exists to serve the purpose of the one who entrusted it. Restore resources to stewardship. Stop asking only, how much can I possess? Ask, what did the Father intend this to accomplish while it was in my hands? Restore generative capacity to responsibility. What can produce life carries responsibility toward life. What can produce another generation cannot be treated as though it has no purpose beyond immediate desire. Restore harvest to continuation. Eat. Be sustained. Rejoice in the provision, but recognize the seed. Preserve what must continue. Plant what must produce again, and above all, restore humanity to the Father, because every other restoration depends upon that one. If humanity separates itself from the one who established purpose, eventually man begins redefining purpose for himself. And when the steward begins deciding for himself what everything is for, the steward begins behaving like the owner. That was never the order. The Father owns. The Father entrusts. The steward serves. The steward cultivates. The steward gives account. That is why the parable of the talents belongs at the center of this teaching. Matthew 25-19 says,
After a long time the Lord of those servants cometh, and reckoneth with them.
there is an accounting. The question is not merely whether we still possess what was entrusted. The question is what happened to it. What did the seed become? What did the knowledge become? What did the revelation become? What did the strength become? What did the compassion become? What did the family become? What did the resources become? What did the opportunity become? What did the promise become? What did the stewardship produce? So the pattern is simple. Receive. Recognize what has been entrusted. Preserve. Protect what must continue. Cultivate. Work faithfully with what the Father provided. Multiply. Allow productive potential to move toward its intended increase. Harvest. Receive the fruit of faithful process. Share. Let abundance become provision beyond yourself. Replant. Preserve what must continue into tomorrow. And through all of it, remember 1 Corinthians 3:6.
I have planted, Apollos watered, but the Most High gave the increase.
Do your part, but do not confuse participation with sovereignty. Plant, water, work, protect, teach, serve, build, cultivate. But the life inside the seed did not come from you. The increase does not originate with you. The order does not belong to you. So stop beginning with what you do not have. Look at what the Father placed in your hand. Maybe you have been asking for a tree while despising the seed. Maybe you have been asking for harvest while ignoring seed time. Maybe you have been asking for abundance while refusing cultivation. Maybe you have been measuring yourself against what somebody else received instead of faithfully using what the Father entrusted to you. Remember the servants. One received 5. Another received 2. Another received 1. The amount was not the test. Stewardship was the test. Do not bury the seed. Do not waste it. Do not despise it because it looks small. Zechariah 4:10 asks,
For who hath despised the day of small things?
The seed may be small, but small is not the same thing as insignificant. Ask what the Father intended it to become. Then cultivate it faithfully, because restored order begins when the steward once again understands the purpose of what the Master entrusted. And when that happens, the steward begins seeing differently. He sees more than the object in front of him. He sees possibility. He sees continuation. He sees responsibility. He sees tomorrow inside today. He sees harvest hidden inside seed. That is restored order. But now there is one final question, because in the last chapter we place two things beside each other, the apple and the currency. By now you already know the difference. Contains seed. One represents value. One carries productive capacity placed there by the Father. One operates inside a system created by man. And the question is no longer simply what they are. The question is, how did humanity learn to value them in the order that we do? Because once a representation of value becomes more important than the things the Father created to sustain life, the order can begin to invert. And that inversion has consequences. If abundance can lower monetary price, then scarcity can become economically advantageous to someone. If productive capacity can be controlled, then access to harvest can be controlled. If the seed can be controlled, then tomorrow can be controlled. If people can be separated from land, seed, knowledge, skill, resources, or productive capacity, then they can become dependent upon whatever system stands between them and what they need to live. And if the thing created to represent value becomes more important than the commandments of the Most High, then the instrument is no longer merely an instrument. It has begun to demand service. Messiah said,
He cannot serve the Most High and Mammon.
That is not a warning against possessing a medium of exchange. It is a warning about mastery. Which one do you serve? Which one determines your choices? Which one tells you what is valuable? Which one tells you what you are willing to sacrifice? And what happens when preserving the symbol becomes so important that a person will violate the commandments of the Most High to obtain it, protect it, or keep from losing it? That is where this teaching must stop. Because we have now reached the boundary between two orders. The first begins with the Father. He creates, He gives, He entrusts, He establishes purpose. The steward cultivates. The harvest comes. The seed continues. The second begins when man places another system between himself and what the Father provided. A system capable of assigning value, controlling access, rewarding scarcity, concentrating productive capacity, teaching people to consume what should have been cultivated, teaching people to waste what should have been preserved, teaching people to serve the representation rather than the one who created the substance. And now we are prepared to recognize the difference. The Judah arc began with responsibility. Who shall go up first? It moved through burden, compromise, assimilation, Babylon, preservation, promise, the lion, and finally, restoration. Judah preserved what was entrusted until the promise reached its appointed harvest. The lion demonstrated perfect stewardship, and restored order reveals the Father's pattern again. Seed, purpose, stewardship, harvest, continuation. So now we can ask the question that must come next, if this is the order the Father established. What exactly are we living in now? Next teaching universe, living in Babylon. May our Father's peace be with you. Remember, our Father blesses motion and obedience to His word. Get it in you. Live it. Shalom.